Hello, and welcome to another edition of Conversations with the Mayor. And this time it's the holiday edition. Welcome, Mayor Arrigo. It's been good to talk with you again. Good to be here on this holiday season. It's been a while since we've talked, so we've got a lot of subjects to talk about this time, and some really good ones, actually. It's always fun to have good subjects to talk about. And being the holiday season, I guess we'll start off with a Christmas present that I think you could say that the city got from the state planning department.
The Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so earlier this month we got notification from the Massachusetts School Building Authority that we were going to be invited into a project funding round for the new Revere High School. And so this is something that we've talked about an awful lot the last couple of years. We've been putting in statements of interest, which is a notification to the state that you are requesting to have a new high school. So we've done that since I got elected in 2016. The last 3 years we had done that. First two were denied, unfortunately, and then this third time's a charm. And we got a little bit of a Christmas gift, and we're really excited. That excitement is also tempered with the expectation and the reality that this is probably going to be a 6 to 8 year process.
I was just going to ask,
And
so that people understand the expectations.
Yep, because obviously the first question is, well, where are you putting it? And how much is it going to cost? And all the things that need to be, all the questions, very important questions that need to be answered. But we have some time to figure that out. And so the first kind of few steps is going to be just making sure that the city council and school committee are on board with the fact that which they have already, they approved unanimously the statements of interest. So now we just have to go back and ask that they are now agreed with the fact that we've been accepted into the program. Okay. And so once that begins, we'll start to name a school building committee, and we can start the planning process for what we think or where we think we should go forward. And the other part of it is that we'll then enter into a feasibility study kind of process. And that will really flush out a lot of the details around what site do we use, or what options of sites do we have? How big is the school going to be? What do we plan for enrollment-wise? One thing that's been interesting is that enrollment in the high school especially has been steadily increasing, which is I think one of the big reasons why the MSBA agreed that we did need a new high school. So we're excited about it. It's one of those projects that doesn't come around all that often, and you work hard, you fight hard for it, you make the pitch, and you continue to make the pitch. And I have to say that the partners I've had in the school committee, Dr. Kelly, and the whole school district have really been helpful, and they've helped drive this ball forward. And what's great is we have so much success and so many success stories to talk about what's happening in our high school and in our school district, that now we get to say what's happening inside. The special things that are happening inside can now be matched with a facility that it deserves and that the district deserves.
Yeah, that's so important to have, because it's been a long time. I mean, that school was 70s?
1974.
Okay, right. So I mean, here we are 40 some odd years later, and it's time. And we know that it's deficient in some areas in terms of the chemistry labs and things like that would ultimately affect its accreditation. So it's good to be moving on in that. And going back to the school and the partners there, and I got to assume that with the beauty of what I see in the whole school department, if you will, is not only the people that are in there now, but the previous people, Superintendent Dakin, Dr. Dakin, Carol Ty, who's a member of the school committee. But to have that continuity of those resources, I have to imagine helped out a lot.
Absolutely. The continuity in the school district, and especially in leadership in the school district, has really helped us drive forward, right? So if you think about when I graduated high school, it was pre-ed reform, 1998. Dr. Diane Kelly was just a math teacher, and I actually had her my senior year. And the continuity of of the leadership from that time period where Carol was still, I think, superintendent, and going forward and having her continue on as a school committee member, having Dr. Dakin come in and lead the charge with the new schools that were built in the elementary and middle school and level, and then having Dr. Kelly, who was under Dr. Dakin for a certain amount of time, rise up into a leadership position in the district. That says a lot for where we're going in terms of our district, and really for a community like Revere, one of the biggest things that we should be able to champion, and one of the things that's most important to my administration, is public education. So we want to make sure that that continuity continues, and that we have the, not only, like I said, the special things that happen inside the classroom, but that the classrooms themselves and the buildings and the maintenance of those buildings is done in a way that where they reflect all of the good stuff that's happening.
And the school department and the schools have gotten that recognition in terms of various national recognition and so forth. So it's really great to see, to be able to build upon that and be able to continue that. And I have to say, from my own personal, and most of my relationship right now is with the Beachmont School. But when I see the principals there in both the Beachmont Elementary School and the Seacoast Academy, Stephen Magno, and the people that work there, and the level of support that those students get, and how much they put of themselves into ensuring that everybody, as Dr. Napier says, be your best or best better bet. It's just incredible to see the impact that they're having, and it's great to see those things to be able to continue on and be able to do good things for the school system. It's so important.
The dedication of our teachers, staff, administrators, everyone in the district really is unmatched in the region, and we're very proud of them, and we're proud of the work that they've done, and we're happy to have something like a new high school to look forward to.
So you're saying there's all the planning process. Maybe it's not fair to ask the stake in the ground. I mean, you're saying 3 years down the line you might be putting, shovels in the ground type of thing?
So I would say that we could get to a point where the completion of the project would be probably 6 to 8 years out, right? So kids can be in the building 6 to 8 years from now. And that's assuming probably a 2-year construction period. So we'll kind of see. I think there's a lot of planning that goes into it, right? And plan to work to plan, you know?
And that being said, and with the planning process, you envision that it's going to be kind of like the open, community meetings a la the HYM, DAG, and things of that nature?
We will have a very public process, as with everything that we've tried to do in terms of being public. You were part of the development advisory group on Suffolk Downs, and I think that process was really unmatched in what we've done in the city previously, and something that we look forward to doing kind of in the future.
And not just because I was involved, but I think it set a great standard for the city going forward in terms of openness and transparency, a term that's thrown out a lot.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Going back to other presents and presents to the community, and that is the Next Stop Revere planning that was just announced, and there's going to be a series of meetings coming up, speaking of open public hearings and conversations to get involved in the planning process. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so master planning process and the idea of public engagement and getting folks involved in the planning of the future of the city has been something that I've talked a lot about and I've been passionate about, and it's something that now, with Suffolk Downs kind of winding down, that public process winding down, we have an opportunity, and so we formally announced that there will be a new kind of master planning process that will be kicking off in January, called Next Stop Revere, not Next Stop Wonderland, Next Stop Revere, and it will be approximately a 6-month process where we really want to get public input on a number of different areas of interest for our residents, and areas of interest I know people have, and so traffic being a big one, right? Traffic and transportation, open space, municipal buildings. We just talked about the new high school. We also have a couple of other municipal buildings that we'll be looking to rehab or renovate, including the Pines Fire Station, including the DPW facility. City Hall is now getting a little bit of an upgrade on their roof, and that was part of the tornado repairs that were required. But we have municipal buildings that we're going to be able to kind of talk about in the future of them. Economic development and figuring out how we grow our commercial tax base and what that looks like, right? And what do people, envision for certain sites along the beach and just in the city in general. So really getting that public engagement and getting people involved and active and thinking critically about the future of the city and what our values are, right? As a community, we are not Somerville, we're not Lexington, we're not Newton, we're not Cambridge, we're not Lynn, we're not Chelsea, we're Revere. And so what does that mean? What's in our DNA? What do we care about? And that public process, that planning process really not only puts out hopefully some actionable items like maybe one kind of opportunity is around zoning. There may be a new zoning map that comes out of some of the master planning process. But we also want to talk about what our values are as a community. What do we care about? What do our kids care about? What do we want to see happen in the next 20, 25, 30 years? So it's a really valuable exercise, and there are intangibles, right? And being able to talk about our values as a community and being proud of them, and why are we proud to be here? Why am I a fourth generation resident who is raising his fifth generation here in the city, and how do I make sure that there's a seventh and eighth and ninth generation? And on the flip side, what does that mean for our zoning map, right? And what are the actionable items that the city can take and the policies, the public policies that we can implement to make sure that what people care about is being kind of driven in the direction that we want it to go.
And to make it all work successfully, I mean, there are just so many pieces and so many things going on. And I guess that comes down to the big question in terms of, where we're doing this long range, big picture planning, with Next Stop Revere process. In the meantime, we've got all the hustle and bustle of HYM, Wonderland, all the stuff that's going on down the beach. How do you, merge the things that are going on now with the things that you're trying to?
Right. That's been an interesting. That's a great question and an interesting thing to think about. I think since I've been in office is how do we manage what we want to do in the short term versus what the impact is for the long term, and kind of keeping the vision on the long term, right? And so I think this is why we wanted to get through. Suffolk Downs is a big transformational project that I think we'll talk a little bit more about. And that required a lot of attention, and including residents, stakeholders, officials, city officials, to really understand and be able to dive in on. And so not until, but for that being done, we could start to think about like longer term visioning process. And so I think that they really had to be kind of two parallel tracks, but the planning process is really overarching and thinking 25, like I said, 30 years ahead, and thinking about what we have, what our assets are, like public education, and how do we continue to make those assets, right? And what steps do we take to make sure that we're continuing to on the track of success that we've had in the past few years.
I got to imagine, maintaining affordable housing while growing the community is another big part of that, right. If you will, challenge, I guess, to some extent in terms of the planning, because the biggest concern is, as you've heard during the HYM and some of the DAG meetings, is, how do we maintain affordable housing for the people that live here now? And you mentioned earlier that Revere is not Somerville, it's not Cambridge. One of the things that came through roaring at me today, I was reading a grant that Dimple had prepared for something that we're working on, and she identified the demographics, and if I'm not mistaken, the statistic was we are 330th out of 350 cities and towns in terms of income level. I think it's the moderate income.
Right, yeah. The median
income. Yeah. Which was like a real eye-opener when you think about, that's a ways to go.
Right.
And how do you do that and balance it?
And balance, right. Yeah. And I think even the affordability question is one that we haven't really, as a community, we haven't talked about, right? And so it's really important for us to have those conversations and to have them publicly and to have input and to have people kind of understand, that Revere, and I think it's not just Revere, it's a region, right? And we look at what's happening with housing costs and just in the entire region. I hear more and more from people about affordability and about the fact that, well, I see what's happening and I can't afford to live in Revere anymore. And that's a big question that I have to tackle as the chief executive officer of the city, make sure that we are creating kind of places and the ability for people to stay here if they want to. And how do we make sure that there's senior housing? How do we make sure that there's veteran housing? And how do we make sure that if people want to live here, they want to stay here, that there are opportunities for them to stay here, right?
One other aspect of the Next Stop Revere planning, I said it right, is the MAPC, and maybe it would be good to talk about the MAPC, who they are, what their role in this process is, because then I remember from a past iteration of trying to do something of this nature, MAPC was central to that, and they still are.
Yeah, so MAPC is Metro Area Planning Council, and the City of Revere has had a long-standing relationship with MAPC, and really there are a couple of different groups that work within MAPC, and there's a Metro Mayors Coalition that I'm part of, which is the City of Boston and a number of cities that surround the City of Boston that all kind of work on these similar kind of issues that we grapple with regionally, opioids being a big one of them. But what MAPC does is bring some of the expertise around planning, especially and around transportation planning, that can help the city and other cities and towns in the Commonwealth really think about what our future should look like, and they bring a technical experience and technical assistance in a engagement like a master planning process that will take several months to finalize and to help kind of create a master kind of plan or a product that at the end of the day everyone can say, okay, this is what we see as our vision for the next 20 years in the City of Revere. And so MAPC has done this in a number of other communities. I thought it was a valuable, it was a valuable exercise, but they've been at the table, for example, at the Development Advisory Group. They were sitting at that table, so they've been involved and engaged. They know what's going on in the city. We meet monthly. I meet monthly with Mark Drazen, who is the executive director of MAPC, and they're a great resource for cities and towns to be able to use to kind of think about how to plan a city and how to think about a vision for your community.
Yeah, you kind of look at them as consultants who understand the process and the technicalities that you said. Are they private, quasi-governmental?
So I believe that at least a portion of the money that they receive is from the Commonwealth. Okay. So they are a public kind of entity, and we also pay dues as a member of of the MAPC kind of region. we pay dues. So.
So talking about the planning for Next Stop Revere, where we're going, and again, talking about how we merge in all the stuff that's going on now, let's move on to some of the things that are going on now relative to the development. We'll start off with the big one, HYM. As everybody's pretty much aware, is that, it passed the City Council a few weeks ago. And so now HYM is in the process of getting ready to actually do some work. Can you tell us about where they're at and what may be the next things we might be seeing?
Yeah, so hopefully they'll be getting some approvals on the Boston side in the new year, and hopefully by next spring we're breaking some ground at Suffolk Downs. That I've talked about it a lot. But that development really is transformational in terms of the amount of commercial, the amount of investment that's happening and will happen there. The Innovation Center, which is going to be a great addition to the Beachmont Square and what they've talked about, what they've envisioned for that site. And it's really a special project and one that will also very, kind of on the forefront of my mind is increase our tax base. The projections that we had, and
Can't
you
do
were
all the
part
other
of
stuff that you need to do without that.
Right, and part of a big part of the conversation that we had with the development advisory group was around what exactly the impacts will be, and how do we start to think about them, and how do we plan for them, and what does, if there is a significant amount of tax revenue that's generated by a development like Suffolk Downs, what are the impacts, and how do we plan for them? How do we think about them, and how do we reduce what tax revenue might come in, to really think about what the net impact will be, right? And so some of those calculations were really eye-opening, I think, for a lot of people. When you factor in some of the projections around the number of kids that are going to come out of there, the number of police and fire that will be required, the number of public services that we'll have to provide, there was still a net number, full build-out of close to $30 million, I think over $30 million in revenue that would be generated from that site. And to have that happen to the City of Revere, that's nearly 40% of our tax revenue. And so to have an increase of that magnitude is good for us, right? It's good, but it's also important for us to think about how we invest and how we use our resources that we have, and how do we make sure that there are investments that make sense. And I've been very careful on towing the line between making sound investments and making sure that our fiscal house is in order. We found $2.2 million that was sitting in different accounts that were laid dormant for some for 20 years. And on the flip side of that, we've been able to make investments. We've made an investment in a new ladder truck. We've made an investment in a new senior shuttle van. Things that really mean a lot to the quality of life of our residents. And I think those are important investments that we need to make, and they're tempered with a sound financial practice that puts the city in a good place.
Yeah, and it's just great to see coming along, and being from Beachmont, and of course one of the biggest impacts will be in our area, and we're really excited to be working going forward to try and ensure that, as I keep saying, Beachmont Square and Beachmont Square become one, and that they grow together.
They grow together, right? And it's important. I mean, the biggest part of that development and that site in Suffolk Downs, I think, as a whole, is the integration into the community, right? And that it's not, and that was a very clear, a clear understanding that the advisory group had as a whole, was this cannot be its own city or its own little neighborhood or its own section of the city. This needs to be part of Beachmont and part of the rest of what's happening in the community.
And it's important to note, I think, that talk about the Harvard community planning development, I think, project with the Harvard students that are going to be in Beachmont throughout next spring to do some policy and reporting on just what the needs are of the businesses and the residents within that area as it relates to this project. It's great to be able to see, going back to the whole thing of trying to get things to mesh together, and do some real planning.
Right. Well, and there are great opportunities, and I think that's one thing that we want to make sure that even businesses know in the community, is that there are going to be opportunities to grow.
Yep.
And one thing that's important is that small businesses understand that what we want to do is really strengthen what they have to offer and make sure that they have an opportunity to take advantage of all of the great stuff that we see happening in the city. Our small businesses should be able to take advantage of, and they should have the opportunity. They should be first in line to take advantage of those opportunities. So that's one of those things where there's going to be, I think in the first phase, 80,000 square feet of retail space that's going to be available. That retail space, I would love to see, local businesses say, I want to grow a little bit, and I want to be down there. I want to be at Suffolk Downs. So that's an important piece of what we talk about.
It's going to be exciting. The other part of the HYM, the impact, of course, on the city is going to be traffic, and traffic improvements and issues have been talked about quite a bit about that. But you can't talk about this without talking about traffic improvements. And that being said, again, you mentioned that they're working and focusing on getting their agreements with East Boston or Boston now. Once that's all done, when do they envision that the traffic work will actually start on some of the improvements, and where might that be?
So the traffic, and as you know from the advisory group, the traffic mitigation, I think as a whole, the package is in the
$50 million.
In the ballpark of $50 million in investment that would be made. And again, to temper that conversation, it was very clear this isn't really improving anything. It's just literally keeping things the same, right? And which is not really not music to anyone's ears, right?
Yeah.
But it is important for people to know that there are investments being made. And some of those investments are going to be shorter term, right? And they're going to be immediate. And then there are things that are going to take a little bit longer and will be important. Two things that I think that are of key to note are the investment on 1A, which was kind of an interesting way to think about how to increase hopefully some capacity on 1A, and then the interchange at Route 16. I think that 16 interchange is just, that will be transformational. To have that happen will ideally, and I think hopefully, alleviate some of the pain that people have. I mean, one thing that we struggle with is the fact that we are a cut-through city, right? We border the city of Boston. We have a booming economy. There are a lot of people who are driving through our city to get somewhere. They're either driving through on the boulevard, they're driving through on Route 1, they're driving through on 1A. And so how do we deal with that, right? And how do we deal with the fact that the majority of the traffic that we see in certain areas, we know on the boulevard, the majority of traffic is coming from out of town, and we have the traffic kind of studies and information to know that 97% of the traffic is in the AM and PM rush hours are coming from outside the city, and they're coming from people that are driving through from Marblehead and Swampscott and Lynn. And does the extension of, and again thinking longer term, does the extension of the Blue Line potentially shift some of that traffic off of our streets? Does a commuter rail stop at Wonderland and in between Necco and Wonderland, does that help alleviate some traffic concerns? Do some of the smaller things that we can do around the edges, some no parking that may alleviate a lane of traffic, kind of open things up. The intersection at Revere Street, Ocean Ave, and the Boulevard is one that is a real pain point for a lot of people. How do we make that a little bit easier to traverse? Yep. These are all conversations that we're having. I think one thing that's important to note is that no solution to any of these problems happens without investment from folks who want to invest in your community privately, right, and from the tax revenue that we generate by attracting some of that investment. So if we can attract investment and we can then mitigate some of those impacts. And it's important, it's important because doing nothing means that we do nothing. And that means no investment in our streets. That means no investment in trying to stop traffic or help the traffic situation. That means no investment in our water and sewer systems. I mean, that's not an option, yep, right? And so what we need to do is think about going forward. How do we invest? How do we make sure that we're getting the highest and best usage out of properties? And how do we really, at the end of the day, positively impact the quality of life of residents in the city?
And as I understand it, going back to the traffic, and I use the word improvements, and my perception was that it's going to improve things for a period of time, but yet somewhere down the road it's going to get back to as bad as it is now unless something else is done. And this is the conversation you and I have had with Bob O'Brien about, when do we get the state involved? And that becomes, and the part and parcel to this whole thing is that I know the state's doing 2040 plan, I want to say, and there's a lot of work and a lot of thought going into long-term how do we deal with this transportation issue? Because as many people pointed out, the minute you make a road better, it's just going to get filled up again, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
So
we've seen it in LA, right? And so like everyone points to LA about what they did. And unfortunately, the real way, and this is not a local issue, but the real way to be able to improve congestion on our streets is to have a really, really great public transportation system. And that doesn't mean just buses, trains. That means buses, right? So bus service has to be at a premium. We're not there yet, right? As a Commonwealth, we're not there. And so that's the only way that you're going to really make an impact on congestion is through public transportation. If there are more people taking public transportation, you free up roads a little bit more. But I know that there are a couple of innovative ideas that are being kicked around. Senator Boncory's talked about congestion.
I was just going to bring him up. Yeah, go ahead.
Some congestion legislation or and tolling around congestion times, and there are a number of different ways to focus on it. We're happy to help however we can. I think we're one city that's dealing with the same issue that everyone in the region and the Commonwealth is dealing with.
So that being said, and then you look at this, Senator Boncory in the state transport, I think he heads up that transportation committee, if I'm not mistaken, he's the chairman. And they're doing this planning. So are cities and towns directly involved in that planning effort in terms of providing input? And relative to the MAC process that we'll be going through here, I'm sure traffic and transportation would be part of that. How does that all feed into it? Again,
so I think it comes from
integrate?
It comes from the ground level, right? And so that's why a public process like a master planning public engagement is really important, because the ideas and the information that we get from individuals who have to live with the problem or the issue each and every day, that is really going to be the strength of any argument that we can make to Senator Boncory or to the governor, to anyone. So really understanding what the pain points are, and then knowing that not just that there's a pain point, but what is a solution, or what are the menu of options around the solutions that we can present, and how do we work on them. Senator Boncory and I have a great relationship, and we stay in touch, and we talk about the issues that are impacting the city of Revere, especially around transportation and traffic. And so I look forward in this next legislative session. We'll be working really closely with him to make sure that whatever kind of set of menu of options that he has to try to alleviate some of these problems gets pushed forward, and we
that'll be
come up with some solutions.
Right? Yeah, because it's, as we pointed out many times, we need to have a great partnership with the state to address some of these things, because people like HYM or the city alone can't do it.
And I'd be remiss without saying that, of course, the Speaker of the House and Rosalie Vincent, Representative Vincent, are incredible advocates for the city of Revere, and Speaker DeLeo has been a great partner and a great leader for the Commonwealth and for the city of Revere.
Yeah, and that's so important, having such a strong delegation up at that level. Right. Well, moving on to the other development things, because there's so much more happening beyond the HYM, as big as it is. I think I heard the other day that there are 12 hotels going up in the city of Revere.
12 I don't think is the right number. So there are a number that are in different kind of process, right, or either planning or permitting process. Right now in construction, there are three, and there's a fourth that will be coming pretty quickly, and so those are really the main and kind of freshest in my mind. There have been some other proposals and ideas for hotels in different other sections of the city, but there are those three that are in the ground, and that fourth that will be coming. Those four are, there's one that's being, ground has broken on the site at 205 Revere Beach Parkway, which is the old Shaw site. Yep. That is
Oh, yes.
that is the hotel that will be going in tandem with the development that's
Gates Residential
close
apartments.
to completion, right? That's one. There are two on the boulevard. So where the shipwreck was, which has been torn down, and there's some construction happening on the ground and some of the parking that needs to be done. And then the site next to it, which is the old Castle Mar
Yep.
Ocean Lodge, which is being torn down. I think it's pretty close to being torn down by now. There will be two hotels, one hotel on each one of those sites, so there'll
Really?
be two hotels there. And then there's another one that will be on the other side of the Marquee Bridge, right?
Is that the one that's going up now, or are those apartment buildings?
That's a mixed-use development that Redgate is doing, and on the other side of the
So the blank side now.
on the blank side right now. So it's still a
Right,
parking lot.
yep.
That hotel is one of the final pieces of the Waterfront Square redevelopment, that TOD project that's been going on for 20
It's been under
years.
discussion for quite a while.
Yeah, and so what's interesting is hearing people who say they didn't know what was going on when with that site and with the development down there, when the fact is that that's been kicking around for 20 years. But we were happy to announce a couple weeks ago that there'll be a new restaurant that's in the process of being built, and that's the construction that you see now on Ocean Ave, which will include I think about 5,000 or 6,000 square foot restaurant, which is going to be operated by the owners and operators of the Real House.
The Real House, yep.
And which is a good restaurant in East Boston. Some great views of the waterfront. We're excited about them bringing their dining expertise to Revere Beach, and then we've got some other interesting things that will be happening. There's some other retail spaces. One it's already been kind of talked about. One on the hotel side will be a Starbucks, which will kind of lead out into the Marquee Bridge. And
Bob Dunbar will be happy about the Starbucks because
Bob will be happy. But we're excited about that piece of the dining experience and the amenities, right? So I've talked a lot about amenities and about what attracts people either down the beach or to any place, right? And it's my wife and I are big fans of going out to eat and dinner, so dining experiences are important, and they help create a great environment. And there's nothing better in my mind than having a great meal outside, looking at the Atlantic Ocean, and kind of taking in all that we have to offer on Revere Beach. And so that is really, it's just really exciting to have something like that come down the pike.
And I was going to say, in my mind, it's a sign that we've kind of turned a corner a little bit with the development down there, because I remember having a conversation with John Festa a few years back about how difficult it was to get quality restaurants, because there wasn't enough developed there. But now that more is developed, it's the old build it and they will come.
Build it and they will come. And I think what's important too is that they're behind the first, right? There's always a first, so you have that first kind of restaurant that may open up or lounge or whatever, and then when that signal and that happens and you kind of cross that bridge, there end up being a second, third, and fourth. And so what we're hopeful for is that the Real House comes in. They're going to be kind of the first new place to open up on new construction to open up on the beach in a while. But once that hits, that there'll be a third, fourth, and fifth behind them. And that's what we want to make sure happens.
Right, and not only at the beach, but in the other parts of Revere, you see, somewhat the rebirth of restaurants on Broadway. Right. You've got departments there, and I just lost it on Park Ave. where they had the sweater, the ugly sweater.
Oh, Valari.
Valari.
Yeah, Valari. Yeah.
You've got D'Amelio's on Revere Street, and there's a couple of other ones, and not only just Italian restaurants, but a whole bunch of other ethnic, if you will, restaurants. So it's just great to see. By the way, I happened to go down there about a week or so. I don't get there down too often at night, and it was really nice to be driving down Broadway and to see all the storefronts and everything lit up. I says, wow, looks good.
Yeah, we've done a great job with, I think, with Broadway and cleaning it up. And one of the important things has been investing in our DPW and making sure that we're on top of it and that we're cleaning things up and we have the staffing and manpower to be able to do that. And, I have to say that the lights on City Hall is this time of year. I have young ones, so they're really excited about it. But the decorations and all the planning and work that goes into making events, like even our tree lighting, which we had earlier this month. Those events, we have a great recreation department, and we do a great job. And those kinds of events make the city a great, very special place.
By the way, and speaking of recreation department, I got to do a shout out to Charlie Jafrida and your ex-aide, Joey Gravelisi, for the great job they did at the Thanksgiving football game. I was listening to that game, and I said to my nephew who was sitting next to me, I said, this is like listening to a professional game. I mean, they were just rolling right along.
Don't go too far.
Well, they did very well. I thought it was a level up, I should say.
We want to be able to see it, like when they come into the office, I don't want to have a bigger room for them to, I don't want their heads to get too big.
And not dissing Peter DiGiulio, who did a fine job, but Joey and Charlie, I was really pleasantly surprised.
So for those of us that had to brave the cold weather and sit through that, well, I stood through that game, which is really, it was a pleasure. And they won. They obviously won their third Thanksgiving game in a row. Has nothing to do with me being mayor for the last 3 years, but we'll continue that streak hopefully.
Well, I couldn't make the stadium, but I went out and watched it in the shed in the cold. So
man, that was a cold day. That was a cold day. But they pulled through, and it was a great morning. Turkey always tastes better when you beat Winthrop.
Yeah, for sure. But you alluded to the recreation department and talking about staffing and so forth, and that was the next area I wanted to get into, because I know there's been a number of changes organizationally within some of the departments within the city. In particular, I mean, I've done a lot of work of late, of course, with the planning department, Bob O'Brien and Tech Lang and Al Baker, and I think Dimple's up in that arena now, and forgive me, I'm forgetting others, I'm sure. Tyler Ash, I think, is up there. Just to see what's happening, to talk about the transformation, because I see it as somewhat transformational, what's going on in the planning department. Frank Stringy is still there doing an unbelievable job.
Yeah, Frank is still there.
But they're kind of setting up for the next generation.
Right,
Yep.
And so there's some continuity, of course, with institutional knowledge, which is incredibly important in a municipality like Revere, which is unique and has its own kind of history. But it's important to start to pave the way for the next kind of crop, right? And so one thing that we've been really careful about is making sure that we can attract the talent that we have here in the city. And Tech Lang, you mentioned her, she's homegrown, Harvard grad, Shirley Ave resident, grew up on Shirley Ave. A rock star, just a real rock star, and we're lucky, and we have a lot of rock stars that work for the city, and I don't mean to point her out, but she is one in the planning department or in our economic development and community development office that has really been able to spearhead things like this master planning process, which don't get off the ground unless I have great staff that can drive them forward. So it's been really important for me to hire and retain great talent in the city, and Tech is one example of dozens of great employees and hundreds of great employees that I have for the city. And Al, which is who has been
another one that's
incredible, right? And one thing that we've tried to make sure that we do, and this goes with the professional. Bringing professionalism to City Hall and professionalizing city services. We had HR. We're able to, kind of have a real kind of stronghold on who the talented folks are that are either in the city or that want to work for the city, how do we attract them? How do we make sure that we have job descriptions and the fundamentals around, making the city the kind of organization that people want to work and want to continue to grow and learn in. And so I'm very proud of my track record of that. And we've got some other interesting developments that have happened. Paula Argenzio is now the DPW superintendent. Donnie Charmella has been promoted to the superintendent of water and sewer.
Okay.
And so water and sewer is one of those areas that is really important that people don't necessarily care about until their toilets backing up, or until there's bad stuff happening, until there's a water break. People aren't necessarily thinking about the investments that you need to make. But Donnie Charmel has done an incredible job. Paula Argenzio has done an incredible job spearheading DPW, and we've been able to invest and make sure that the equipment and the resources and the manpower that they need is there, and is there to make an impact on people's quality of life.
Now, they have a new facility coming along, don't they?
We got a bond authorization through the City Council that approved $22 million for a new DPW facility. Of course, when you say $22 million for a new DPW facility, people's eyes light up a little bit. I think it's important for people to know that that's kind of the maximum that we would ever spend. And then, what we're doing right now is planning, looking at the site and planning out what exactly we need for a footprint. That was the highest kind of level of what we thought we would need. The way that I look at that is we can work within that kind of budget that we have, and we'll make sure that we have a top-notch facility that meets all the needs but isn't excessive. And because the first thing people would say is, what's it got, gold toilets? And none of that is the case, and we'll make sure that every penny is spent properly, and folks just have to look at my own office to see that we're not extravagant by any means. So we're excited about the fact that they're going to have a site that they can work out of. The other investments that we're looking to make are, at the Pines Fire Station, for example. That's another one that's important for us. And again, we've been able to.
John Powers is happy about that one.
Councilor Powers is very happy.
He's been fighting for that for a long time.
He's been fighting for that for a long time. And one thing that we've made sure is that even as we increase staffing, we've been able to increase our fire department staffing through some SAFER grants, which are grants that are given by the federal government to help cities and towns increase their staffing levels in public safety, especially in the fire department. We want to make sure that our equipment and our facilities match what we have in terms of staffing. And so with all of that's happening along the beach and all of the development that we see and all the growth, one thing that's important is to make sure that every area of the city is covered. And one place that we're not covered right now, we want to make sure we are covered, is down the Point of Pines. And that can cover the eastern side of the city, down the boulevard, Ocean Ave, and into that area. So we're excited about that. Another kind of movement of progress and making sure that the city is moving forward and we're keeping up with all that's happening around us. Yep.
Speaking of the Point of Pines, what's happening in the police department, or fire department rather than police and fire, excuse me. Anything new going on in the police department, organizational changes, or
so we had
down the road?
We had the organizational review of the department that was done by Chief Kais and Chief Ryan from Chelsea and Arlington. They kind of laid out a blueprint for where we should be looking to go. We've instituted a lot of the organizational kind of structural changes that go along with that, including Chief Guido was promoted. We promoted Captain O'Hara, but she's also now in charge of our public engagement. We will be hiring a civilian public engagement person that we'll work with Captain O'Hara to make sure that we're building trust in the community and that people feel like that they're represented they can go to the police department, and we can build relationships in the community. Chief Guido will continue his leadership in the police department. I've been excited about his work, and he's done a great job of implementing some of those changes organizationally and thinking about how we move forward. And the biggest part of moving forward in our police department will be, adding bodies and having the staffing that we need to run a great public safety apparatus, and to make sure that the city's covered, and that we have capable, able, great police officers out there that are putting their kind of lives out on the line each and every day. They have an incredibly difficult job. One thing that has given me perspective, especially around public safety, has been, and I don't talk about this a lot, but I've gone out with both police department and fire department, and I've gone for ride-alongs and spent hours on shift with our
Having
police.
been on one, I understand what it's like.
On our
It's pretty
police,
interesting.
with our police and fire folks, and that gives me so much appreciation for the job that
Certainly
they
does.
do each and every day. And I'm getting a little bit of goosebumps, but the work that they do is, not only essential to the operation of the city and public safety in the city, but those folks really, really all they care about is going home to their family at the end of the night or the end of the day, and they have the toughest jobs, And I come from a place where my job is kind of tough, but I think the governor mentioned this pretty recently. He said, my bad day is, a reporter asked me a tough question or getting heckled a little bit. Bad day for a police officer, a firefighter, not even in the stratosphere of what a bad day is for me as mayor.
It's a whole other level in the trenches. You're right, exactly. I mean, it's so much more personal and so much more impactful when you're dealing at those levels.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
And it gives me appreciation for what I have to do as chief executive to give people the resources and the training and the ability to succeed and do their job well, and how important the equipment is, and how important the facilities are, and how important little technology is, right? Those little things that can, make their lives easier and make them do their job even better. I mean, we have some of the best police and firefighters in the Commonwealth, and for us to have them do a little bit better job or be a little bit more efficient or effective because of a tool that they may be able to use, or some technology that is available, is really important. And I only get that experience if I'm there with them, right? I'm having conversations with them, and I'm able to have a dialogue and see what they're seeing kind of on the ground level,
Right.
And it's
Walk
really
in their shoes
an
a
incredible
little bit.
experience. Yeah, it's not even, it's not
Well, a
even
little
close
bit.
to
No, but I'm
walking their
saying,
shoes, right?
when you do the ride along, when
but
you're face to face with those
It gives
situations,
you, when your heart is pumping, and you're
walking in their shadow. Let's just
walking
put
in
it
the
that
shadow.
way.
That's a good way to put it. And it's really special. And this one little story about the fire department. I spent an overnight with the fire department, and the last call that we got was around 6 a.m. And I hadn't gotten more than probably a half hour of sleep. And so by that time, I was, a little foggy, and I got in, and I remember I get into the fire engine, and I'm wiping the cold out of my eyes, and I'm like, still kind of figuring out where I am. And the three other guys who were with me were ready to go. I mean, they were locked in. Barry, who was driving, was ready to go. We were pulling out onto Broadway, and I'm still kind of yawning, right? And, just that experience and seeing kind of how they're wired, right? And how they're wired to do their job so well, and to be locked in, even after, not much sleep, is impressive. It also makes me think about how we make sure that their home lives are as productive as they can be, and how how important their quality of life is outside of the work that they do, the incredibly difficult work that they do.
It's an interesting aspect of it, because I don't think many people think about
that. Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah. The other area that I wanted to talk about was 311 and the community liaison position with Priscilla Nickerson. And again, having had some personal involvement with Priscilla and attending the BIC meetings on a monthly basis, and having conversations with Alan at 311, and have called in a few things. It seems to be going pretty good. I mean, at least from my perspective, it's been very helpful in resolving a few things.
It's been great. 311 has been a success so far. We've had over 20,000 phone calls. You know, just phone calls, right? Not including emails or tweets or texts or anything like that. Phone calls from, I think, somewhere in the range of 14 or 15,000 different unique phone numbers.
How do you screen them? How do you have?
And yeah, so
I mean,
with near, close to, and it's all kind of through the software that they have and the system they have. Everything gets kind of, you can see how many unique phone calls there are and how many calls they're taking each day. And the peak being our January storm, and we expect, as we come into the winter season, as we have weather events, that we'll be able to use 311 as a resource for the residents. But over 20,000 phone calls, 7,000 service items that we've delivered as a city to the residents, right? Potholes, down trees, different items that come in as a service request. Over 7,000 of them were completed, through 311. So I think that that shows a kind of need and the interest in people understanding that they can kind of get an accurate answer from City Hall, that they can get some courteous customer service, and that it can be easy for them to access the services that we deliver each and every day. With Priscilla, she's came on board. She's an incredible asset to the city. I can't say enough about what she does for our community, what she's always been doing for our community. And now we have the opportunity for her to be out and be a liaison to groups like the Beachmont Improvement Committee, Revere Beautification Committee, and not only be kind of a liaison for those organizations, but also eyes and ears on what is happening in 311. Because it's one thing to take the phone calls and input something into a system and hear that things are done. It's another to actually be out on the street and have eyes and ears on what's happening. And Priscilla is that connection between Revere 311 in the office and out in the street. And so she's been a great asset. And I have to say, additionally, we have the great staff down there. Randy and Alan have been there since the inception. And of course, we have a new call taker, Angelica, who has been fantastic. Great. Multilingual, which is very helpful. Perfect. And one that it's important for us to embrace the diversity that we have in our community. One of the things that I know will come out of our master planning process, and talk about values and as a community, a big value of ours and a big important piece of what we are and who we are as a community is our diversity. And to have City Hall be represented, and to have the community represented in City Hall, and have people who can answer questions in multiple languages is really important. And we're able to do that with Angelica, and she's been a great asset.
One of the things I wanted to point out is that, as part of this process with 311 and Priscilla as the community liaison, and we always talk about the integration of different things and how she's integrated with 311, but more importantly, I don't know if it's every other week or every week, she meets in your office with department heads. Right. And you all go through some of these issues to figure out where is it, what's got to be done. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
because, that's an important thing that I don't think a lot of people understand.
Right, the important piece is knowing that not only are things getting, I don't want to say tracked, but we know where service requests are coming in to and what we need to do. But making sure that we're putting the resources towards them, right? And so that we have the adequate staffing, but also knowing that, I'm on top of some of these things, right?
Yep.
And so Priscilla is helpful in pushing that forward. We do meet and we talk about things that are either outstanding. One thing that we had, and I've talked about this before, we have we had a sidewalk backlog of nearly 300 or 400 different sidewalks that needed to be done. We've gotten that down. We've whittled that down. We've been able to hone in on and invest in where we needed to be, and make sure that there aren't big backlogs like that, right? And that the work that we do each and every day is getting reflected, and we get the credit for it, right?
Yeah.
Because people need to know that there are things being done, that their tax dollars are going towards the quality of life and improvement in quality of life for the city, and that we start to think proactively about some of what we do, right? So that people, when they see either trash on a sidewalk or dumping or a shopping cart, that there's an easy way for them to get it resolved, but that our city staff is thinking proactively about those items as they see them, and 311 has been successful, and we're proud of that. It's been a little over a year that it's been in existence, and we look forward to continuing that and making sure that there are other areas. I've heard from people who say, well, why isn't it open at night? And why aren't there people taking phone calls at night or on the weekends? Yeah. And so we're gonna kind of see if we can do something around that. One thing that's important is during weather events, making sure that there is some coverage during weather events, and that we can actually track where snowplows are and live
and nothing but other sorts of emergency situations when the tornado comes up, because that's the biggest part is communication and being able to receive input from all around the community.
Right.
You're right.
Right.
Yep. Well, I think we've come to a point where it's time to close.
Yeah.
We could go on for hours.
We could go on.
We've covered just about everything that I had in here. There's been so much going on this year. There's so much going on now, and there's a lot to look forward to going on. So it's been a real pleasure. It's been a great year, and I'm looking forward to another good year.
Yeah, thank you,
Ed. And
Ed.
as always, thank you so much.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays
Happy New Year.
to you, and happy holidays to everybody else out there. And until we get to do this again, take care.